Hello, I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Teleos. Welcome back to our first Bible study on the book of Ephesians. I'm glad you're here. We're in chapter 4, and this is a section of Ephesians, chapters 4 to 6, where Paul discusses the Christian walk. And it begins first emphasizing that within the structure of the church and the fact that we're saved, and this was discussed in chapters 1 to 3, we are to be unified in doctrine and in loving one another. And this is all based upon the fact that we're saved. And this is in verse 7 where Paul states that he gave everybody grace needed to salvation through Christ. So remember, we're saved by faith alone in Christ's death and resurrection. He then goes into a very interesting passage, starting in verse 8, quoting Psalm 68:18, written by King David, when he took Jerusalem. It's thought to be when he took Jerusalem to make it the capital of Israel. And he ascended up on high. Remember, Jerusalem is high up in elevation and more easily defended. So he ascended, taking captivity captive. Otherwise, he ended the captivity of those people who believed and took them with him as he ascended, which types his ascension into heaven after his resurrection. So it's because he was resurrected, because he ascended and sit at the right hand of God, we sit with him. Okay, as it reflects in with our spiritual baptism, Romans 6, Ephesians 2, and Colossians 2, we sit with him as free people. So he's the one who ascended. He also came to earth to provide salvation in verse 9, and we're in verse 10, completing this section. It says, he descended in the same also that ascended up far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. So the verse is completing this section that references Psalm 68:18, saying that yes, Christ descended, he came and died for us, and thus he ascended following his resurrection. From there and this is taken from other verses like the end of Ephesians 1, Hebrews 8:1, where it says he sits at the right hand of God the Father, indicating his work for salvation is complete. And sitting there, he comes to head the church, which is the main point of the discussion here. It's pointing back to the church. It's the basis of the church, the fact that God sits there. We sit, or Christ sits there at God's right hand, and we sit there with him at Christ's right hand as believers. We ascended with him, like the typology in Psalm 68:18, back in verse 8. A little complicated, but really neat stuff. So then based on this, next time we'll start looking at the historical development of the church itself, and then move into how we are to act within the church, a little bit really in the second half of the chapter. Great stuff. Glad you're here. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.